Now, I want to look at getting into just a few examples that we've seen in either Hollywood games and movies. Now, you've recommended me to watch a movie V for Vendetta, which I'm still kind of getting through. But I like to take it a bit back. You'll see, I mean, I was a fan of playing games when I was growing up. One game that I really like, and I'm talking about the originals, because I never really listened to the movies or some of the more modern remakes of the game, but that was Resident Evil. Resident Evil essentially is a game about a virus called the T-virus, which is spread through Raccoon City, which is apparently a city somewhere in America. And that city that infects people, turns them into zombies, very extreme. They're just like eating each other's organs out and shit. I mean, that hasn't happened. Hope it hasn't happened yet. But hope it doesn't happen. So
next year's strain will probably make people start eating each other.
Well, yeah, you never know what these strains will do, but that's something. That's something that's really extreme. But I think it's more the context and unfolding of that narrative, which is very interesting. Because what it is essentially people turning against people as a result of the virus. That's what we've got to look at. You mentioned protest, riot, march. Okay, maybe these people aren't eating each other to bits, but a virus has triggered this social unrest, triggered this uneasiness. Everything has become a lot more bleak and a lot more kind of ominous in the existence of humanity as we currently know it. Yeah. It feels very surreal. I feel like there's a lot of movies out there like that, a lot of games out there like that, post-apocalyptic nature. What do you think those movies, those games have all subconsciously put in the minds of people leading up to this very moment in this human experience?
Well, I guess it's like a system of like pre-programming, sort of gets you used to and ready, gets you used to seeing these type of things, so that you're sort of ready for potentially when it plays out in real life. You know, movies like Contagion, Outbreak, things like that about like a killer virus that has, potentially started spreading globally. I think Contagion was like that. It started to spread globally, and then obviously the ending of the movie was everything was solved once the vaccine came through. So that's like the holy grail kind of thing of rescuing people from these movies. Movies like V for Vendetta, which shows like the possibility of a fascistic, government rising up in a Western country that you wouldn't expect in the UK, which is very similar to like the Third Reich in Hitler's time, and how that global digital scientific control takes over a society in a very modern day sense. So I think seeing things like that enables you to have a sort of perception of that as just being a movie. Okay, so
rather than, because see, one thing is we're made to believe movies are just fantasy.
Exactly. So when it does happen in real life, you're like, that wouldn't happen. That's just a movie. Like they'd never do that kind of thing. So I think like you would have to really see something happening right before your eyes before you would be like, oh wow, maybe that is actually happening. And I think I've spoken to a few people about this, and I still get the response from some people like, oh yeah, but that's just movies, that's just sci-fi. Well, we're living in like science fiction right now. We're living in history. We're living in science fiction. It's all here right now. Like if 2020 was a movie and now 2021, like it'd be the most off the charts like sci-fi movie you could imagine.
Oh, absolutely. I think the unfolding of society as we know it over the last year has been something out of a movie. I remember speaking to a lady in Italy, and she said to me, look, after everything that happened in Italy, remember Italy was one of the countries that got hit the hardest at the beginning of the coronavirus. She said, this whole thing is crazy. It feels like a movie. Everything just went from bad to worse. I can't believe something would be like that. To me is a shocker, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I've had people say it feels like we're living in a movie,
and it did feel like that a year ago. It did feel very much like a movie, and things were sort of. I remember you asked me a question in the first podcast maybe of why do you think you felt that this was going to go this way? And I don't think I said this at the time because it sounded silly, but I wanted to say that watching that movie V for Vendetta, and I've said to quite a few people in the last year, almost made me anticipate play by play how things were going to roll out, because I don't think you've got to that part of the movie yet, but so I won't ruin it for you. But it kind of plays out very similarly to how it's playing out now, and theories that link to things that are happening now. You know, about governments potentially doing things to their population to achieve a certain end, and very much. Even in March, I could see how this would potentially unfold if it was following that pattern, and it has followed that pattern exactly.
It's very interesting how it has followed the pattern that we see unfold. Now let's look at the end game, okay? So like I said, there could be a positive to the vaccine, which means everything just goes back to normal, or we're going to see something very foreboding on humanity, very ominous. Essentially, at the moment, it's about, I think, how many people? There are 8 billion people in the world right now. Maybe I mean I can't give you an exact figure. Can't give you an exact figure. So essentially, there's quite a lot of people out there, and you know, one of the talks that we find, you know, that come up is depopulation, right? Or the world does not have enough resources to accommodate for all these people, especially depending on what part of the world you're in, right? With that and with what's going on at the moment, will we ever go back to a normal life prior to 2020?
In short, like I have quite confidence in saying that there will never be a sense of going back to normal. We have been pre-cognitively programmed since last year to accept new normal as the new normal. Basically, it's how things are going to run in the future.
And that documentary I showed you really highlighted. I saw this documentary by Happen TV called New Normal, which I want to thank my friend for sending me. It was Alan. Thank you so much for sending that.
Very informative about a lot of the things that have happened that have not been given much airtime in the news.
And it was a very confronting documentary, very confronting. And, you know, if you're a rational person, you're going to look at that and, you know, yes, there are subjective beliefs and values in it. But it is like you can't unsee what you see happening in front of you, right? One thing I would like to bring up, okay, now that we said we never know the world as it is, and anybody can, you know, people don't have to, you know, say, oh, you know, I've got that, what's it called? I'm talking out of my arse or whatnot, but I feel like I have that sixth sense, right? Because at the very end of my last trip, when I visited the former Soviet Union, Ukraine, Belarus, all those countries, right? What I saw when I was standing around in that club in Qatar, listening to some Wycliffe John, Bloodhound Amira, and, you know, seeing all these, you know, try-hard rich people walk around, was I was going into this deep cognitive thought pattern where I'm like, this does not make sense how my trip has ended like this. I don't know what my next international trip is going to be like, but there's something really off-center about the ending of this trip compared to any of my other previous trips that I had traveled, right? Why I thought that was in that same trip that year, I carried 2 books. One was my System 333 book, beginning, right? And the other was a copy of 1984. I was sitting down in a cafe in Georgia, and I'm not talking about Georgia in America, I'm talking about Georgia, the country, in Bootsy, with a guy who was a French scientist, right? And we had a coffee and we were talking, and he said to me, he called me a fatalist, right? And then he goes, I recommend you read a book, 1984. And I said, it's funny you recommended that book to me. I have that book with me this trip.
Funny.
And he goes, why are you such a fatalist for? And, you know, I'm a very up and going, happy dude. Like, I've got shit to do. I've got that ambition. But you can't unsee what you see happening in the world right now. I'm not going to be delusional about what the reality is. It's not a conspiracy theory anymore. I have a major in history.
The wheels are in motion.
I have a major in history, and I have seen the patterns and unfolding of history. And what I wrote, you know, at the end of my trip to Greece was that history repeats itself. The cycle of suffering is there, and the prophets have come and shed their blood for the sake of humanity to end the suffering, right? Because the suffering is something whereby humanity willfulness to control the greater population. The society, as seen in the Tower of Babel, written in the book of Genesis, is the same pattern that you see happening again and again and again. And if you read the book of Daniel and you take a look at the chapter number 2 and understand the statue, the prophecy of the statue, and how the statue had the head of gold, the breastplate with the chest of silver, the thighs of bronze and brass, and then the feet of the feet of iron with the toes of clay, and then the statue being shattered, was indicating that every kingdom would go through their own cycle of rising up and destruction. We need to see that this is another kingdom, another entity coming to take control, not of a localized area like Europe or Persia or whatever, but of the whole world. And through this particular model that we see that we've been discussing, it seems like this is the next global kingdom through technocracy, through a medical imposition via a vaccine, and also through the ability to be able to control the information to indoctrinate people on a macro level, right? Whether it's social media, TV, whatever. What do you think, man? What do you think is going to happen?
If I can jump in there for a sec, what I want to add to that is that what you're sort of saying there, people, I think largely people would not accept what you've just said there, because often, like, we think of historical events as having happened then. So we think of future historical events happening there in the future. No one ever really stops at the time to think and realize history is taking place right now. This is stuff that will be talked about in school books. And this is the Nazi Germany of that era, that will probably be talked about in future textbooks. How truthfully it gets talked about, I don't know, but this is honestly one of those times in history that will be foretold, and talked about for years to come. And I think what stops people from realizing all these things that we've been talking about is they think that wouldn't happen to us. That wouldn't happen. Why us? That wouldn't happen in our time. So I think it creates some sort of separation from the events that are really happening, and then a disassociation from that. Do you kind of agree with that?
The reason you do not feel it now is because, or we do not feel it now, is because our mind is so preoccupied.
And they're not
the internet, the media, we're not in tune with what's really going on. As soon in the Soviet Union, they were out beating each other out on the street, right? To an extent, that's kind of happening in America. But wait till you see that happen. Once they come to your door and once they take you. Seen the movie 1984, Red 1984.
There'll still be people who won't believe it even when that's happening.
Exactly, but it happened in history. I remember I was in the museum in Yekaterinburg, right? That's the middle of Russia, and I saw the history of what had unfolded after the Soviet Union fell, and that was a very interesting period. The program that people get put in, and it's just, basically what I'm getting at is that if you have not seen the patterns of history unfold as is in the past, you can never understand the patterns of history that are bound to repeat itself in the future, correct?
And I think as well, like going back a little bit to what we discussed in the movies, 1984 being a book written in, I think, 1948, and then it was readapted as a film. So that story basically describes where we are very much heading to in a near future society. Even if you look at things like censorship, control of perception through what you see on the TV. Now you hear I'm not going to go into a left and right debate, but you hear the very, very, sort of radical left in the US, and now under like the Biden administration, they're very much trying to control this normality of their perception of what normal should be as being adopted by everyone, where it's just not that. It's not the case. They're trying to separate, get rid of one line of thinking and make their line of thinking the way of thinking that everyone needs to adopt to, under the disguise of unity, basically. So I think in that book, it very much talks about how, language is controlled. They eliminate certain words, so it changes human thinking and cognitive abilities. So you're basically limited to a certain line of thinking which falls under the programming of that control grid and whoever's pulling the strings. So I do think these are the baby steps and large steps now of what is actually leading towards a 1984 type society, like a Big Brother type.
Making
society.
it kind of, you did mention kind of making us like robots, like they're
and I think
kind of robotic.
they're sort of ushering that in via this medical scientific tyranny, basically, which is very much now looking like it's going to be orchestrated through a global.
People respond more to fear, and that's why people comply.
The fear of death.
Exactly. Now, I want to really come to a close on this podcast, right? Before I bring in my close of what I wanted to say, is there anything that you'd like to add more, Dom? I mean, it's been a very in-depth conversation. I've really been able to open up and express some of my views that people may have not known about me on this camera. The main reason is I do have a genuine concern for people, for their lives, for their freedom, for what may possibly go wrong. And that's coming from a place of understanding of research for many years, more than 15 years of me even, being in the academic field and understanding history and patterns and all this, right? What would you like to add as a holistic understanding for today's podcast?
Firstly, like in agreement with what you're saying, like we're not just talking about random theories we read on the internet and we're just reciting it. We're not like conspiracy theorists. Like we're not talking about anything that we haven't looked into thoroughly and researched over, at least the last year. Many years if you're looking at historical things. These are things that we're reciting that have actually happened, things that, we question because they've been censored, the control of information has been largely censored. People who have been very outspoken about this stuff have been taken off platforms. These platforms, big tech companies have largely controlled our perception over the last year of what's going on, which leads, big question marks as to what is really going on. That's why there's so many people out there having discussions like this. And I think if for a moment I could sort of take it down a route of where possibly this could go, I very much hope it doesn't, but I think if people don't have some sort of awakening, then it is heading that way. There's very much lately they've been talking about this great reset, the fourth industrial revolution. What's his name? Schwab from the World Economic Forum, the guy who heads that up. He's been talking about this great reset for a few months now, very much pushing us towards like this idea of like a post-human favored future. Basically that, we'll have machines doing everything for us. We won't really be that necessary. We'll survive off universal basic incomes. We won't earn much, but we'll be happy regardless. Basically trying to sell.
What life is that?
It's trying to sell what was packaged as a conspiracy theory for many years. Guys like David Icke, Alex Jones have been warning us for many years, this is where it's heading. And now it's basically being rebranded and sold to us as something that we should like and accept. Like, I don't know if you saw that little like ad they did for like the Great Reset when it showed. Did you see that at all? It showed, I'll send it to you later, but it shows like this guy like looking all happy and it says in text, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. And
I've seen that.
Getting used to this new normal, and it said like drones will bring you everything you need. So it's that idea of lockdown, you stay at home, you live in a small space, you won't need much, kind of getting us used to this post-human, maybe human 2.0 future. And look, I've for some time have been believing that eventually machines will sort of be brought in to do the work that humans were doing in a post-pandemic world, so that we are no longer necessary, they can keep production going, and that's how it'll be sold to people, when really maybe we're just being ushered out. This is the cataclysmic event that, say the dinosaurs went through, this is our one, and maybe they're going to sort of bring in some system of, scientific control, create AI, all that sort of stuff. They're talking about brain implants in people. Elon Musk has been very outspoken with that, having people connect to the internet.
All this stuff is happening for real to a degree. You've got to remember, anything that is continuously worked on and projected to be worked on.
It's being said now. It's being said, like,
it's being said
by
now.
these
it's being worked on now. It's being worked on now. It is. I just want to finish off, and I'm going to finish off by reading the section on the mark of the beast at the end, right? It's going to be, I just want to read this because this really reinforces, you don't have to believe it, all right? I'm not telling you, but this is what it says, and this is, you know, I think this is a very interesting thing, and I'm reading it straight from the King James, right? So it says, and I beheld another beast coming out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and spake as a dragon. He exercises the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he makes fire come down from the heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image of the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had the power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causes all, this is the part I want, this is the part, okay? So, and he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man may buy or sell, save that he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666, which is 666. Right? I'll leave that with you. Interpret it any way you like.
I think whether you're religious or not, some of the things in Revelations are almost too similar to what's going on to ignore. And I've even found myself believing some of this stuff lately and thinking, wow, this could actually unfold.
No man may buy or sell. I gave a bit of context there, but great, like both small and great, rich and poor.
Doesn't matter who you are.
Free and bond. What was I saying? They're trying to equalize everyone on the same level by receiving something that will make them all buy and sell.
Like
what does that sound like to you?
Like
in a modern context, what does that sound like to you guys?
Yeah.
Tell me that, all right? I mean, you can pick it, you know, it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy. One of these guys could have read it and said, let's make the mark of the beast. That's all well and true. The point is, this is what's happening.
I think it's like they've given us our time, our fun in the sun, you know, our years of thinking that, you know, we have all this and that, and now it's come down to this centralization of everyone's the same. They all fall under a more systematic, smaller level of control, which is looking like it's being conducted more globally. And yes, it's very scary prospects that could be unfolding. Like,
can't say that it's definite, but you know, I'm just being the devil's advocate here, no pun intended. Got that one. All right, guys, I want to say thank you very much for watching through all this. It was quite intense, quite detailed. And I want to thank Dom for being here on the show. Glad to do a face-to-face one. That's awesome. And I hope for those, don't stop believing, don't stop grinding, don't stop being ambitious, don't be a victim. Get out, do what you love doing, and when the time comes, just be aware and be alert. And he who has his letters here, I want to thank you all again.
Yeah, and I think just think for yourself, guys. Don't just believe and accept everything you see and hear on TV or in the news. Do your own reading, your own research. Don't shut people down for having a different view to yours. And yeah, just keep getting through it.
That's it. Happy 2021, guys.
See you guys.
Take care.